Hi guys, and welcome back to another eReels video. Now today's video is going to be focused all around the results to the March 22 exams. Now by now you should have received your exam results, and I really do hope it came out as a pass. If not though, don't be too downhearted, learn from it and come back stronger. That's kind of what today's video is designed all around, because today's video is going to give you a breakdown of the examiner's report for the exam itself. Now, every sitting, every quarter, Skills and Education Group release a Chief Examiner's Report, where they talk through statistics in terms of how well candidates did or how well they didn't do. And it also gives you a breakdown of each question on the case study exam. So, I've purposefully not looked at this. This is the first time I'm going to look at it, so you're going to get my first time real live reaction to the examiner's report. And I'm going to be honest as I possibly can. Okay, let's get into it. Right then guys, well first things first, we don't supply the examiner's report on our online study portal. However, you can get your hands on it. All you need to do is Google Skills and Education Group, Transport Manager Exams and go through to their website, whereby you can see all the past papers that we do supply, but you can also see the examiner's report. And here it is. Okay, so here we see the Level 3 Certificate of Professional Competency for Transport Managers, Passenger Transport. And as I'm sure you know, the examination date was the 11th of March 2022, and this is the Chief Examiner's Report. So it starts off with some general comments. The report below is intended to give tutors and candidates advice and guidance when preparing for future examinations. It sets out to explain where candidates in this examination were or were not awarded marks for their answers. This report should be read in conjunction with the further guidance given within the Skills and Education Group Awards website. At the recent awarding meeting, the pass marks for the case study and multiple choice papers were decided according to the procedures outlined by Ofqual. This is done for every examination series to ensure that candidates always have an equal chance of being awarded the qualification, regardless of the series in which they sit the examination. So essentially what they're saying is there is no set pass mark. There is a nominal pass mark on both exams. So we generally go on the rule that the pass mark for the case study is around about 30, so 30 out of 60. And the pass mark on the multiple choice is generally around about 40 out of 60. But we can never tell you what it will be. It could be 28, it could be 34, it could be any of those. But just work on the fact that you've got to get around about 30 on the case study, 40 on the multiple choice. In this case, it says 91 candidates sat this exam. Well, that's neither here nor there. I don't even know what that means. I don't know whether that means 91 sat the case study or 91 sat the multiple choice or sat both or what, I don't know. It doesn't matter. The pass mark was set at 32 and 48.3% of candidates achieved this level. Now, it doesn't specifically state it there, but that's the case study, I believe, there. So the case study mark was set at 32, so just above the nominal pass rate of 30. However, only 48.3% of candidates achieved this level. So on first look, I'm not sure whether that makes sense really. They've raised the pass marks. They're suggesting that potentially it was a slightly easier exam than normal. However, that pass rate is only at 48.3%, which is lower than the general 50% average, which would suggest that actually it was a fairly difficult exam. But we'll go on and look at the questions and we'll figure out why that is. The P1 multiple choice paper was considered at the awarding meeting, and examiners concluded that the pass mark for this paper should be set at 40. So there you go, pretty standard that one. And 51.7% of candidates achieved this mark. Okay, so now we're above that general 50% mark. Now, just looking at those statistics there, that's a little bit skewed for me, because if you've watched any of my previous sessions, or probably some of the other instructors, people always ask us the question, what's harder? Multiple choice or case study, or what should I focus on? And I always kind of give the indication that, well, The case study is the exam that you can really train yourself for in terms of the way it's structured and the way the examiners want the answers, and you can train yourself to pass that exam. Whereas the multiple choice exam is different because it's all just knowledge retention. So I always suggest that the multiple choice exam would be the harder. Whereas if you look at these statistics, that would suggest that actually the multiple choice exam was possibly the slightly easier one than the case study exam in this case. So maybe in future for passenger transport, it's about focusing more on that case study a little bit. But I guess on average, between the two, you're looking at 50%. Centres are reminded once again that candidates should not use loose sheets to answer questions unless all of the blank additional sheets in the answer booklet have been used. Where it is necessary to use loose sheets, they must be plain lined pages, not templates for any particular type of question, and they must be clearly marked with the centre name and number and the candidate's name and number. This is just us getting told off basically, or any of the other exam centres that host skills and education group exams. So don't worry about that too much, that's down to us to worry about. It's important for candidates to note that examiners will always mark the first answers given in the answer booklet, unless it has been clearly crossed out and annotated to show that the candidate has rewritten the answer on a different page. We would remind candidates that this examination is not a test of handwriting, spelling, grammar or punctuation, but it is important that examiners are able to read and understand the answers being given. The crucial factor, as with all examinations, is that candidates must read each question carefully. This includes the notes attached to each question, as marks are so often lost by candidates because they did not follow all instructions given. Examiners will always give candidates very clear instructions in each question, and it is therefore critical that candidates follow every instruction and answer exactly what is being demanded of them. So they've kind of given with one hand and taken with the other in that phrase there. So what they've said there is, look, they're not worried about spelling and grammar and things like that. It's not a test on that. They're testing on your knowledge. So that's good, because they're saying, look, if it's spelt wrong or if it's written slightly wrong, don't worry about it. All we want to see is that you've clearly given us an answer. So just be clear on it. Don't worry and say, oh, I can't spell depreciation or whatever it is. Don't worry, just get it down, because the examiners will regard all of it. But what they've also said there is, read the damn question. Right? We've written this question for a reason, read it. And it happens in every single sitting that we've ever done from 2012, when the syllabus changed and was a combined international and national joint syllabus. It's always been the same. Candidates always fall down by not reading the question carefully enough. And it's so easily done, because you're in that exam, that pressure scenario. It's so easy to miss little bits and details, but that's why the practice makes perfect in this exam. The more you practice them, the more used you become to finding those little minute bits of detail. The more used you become to learning what the examiner means by when they say a certain thing. So that's where I would say practice really does make perfect in this instance. But let's get into the questions and let's have a look at what they asked in this particular exam and how well candidates did. Question 1. Sam proposes to operate a new morning bus commuter service between Wavingham bus station and Wolvingham railway station via the Chase estate. Use the information provided in the case study to calculate the minimum number of buses required to operate the proposed service each weekday. Okay, not a question that's always asked in a passenger exam, but is quite often asked, is working out numbers of buses, numbers of drivers, rostering drivers, working out the shortest possible route sometimes, working out how to interwork routes. So this is a fairly common question, and it's down to, and I haven't looked at the case study so I don't know all the information, but I'm guessing it's about extracting all of the information from the case study, figuring out all the timings for your routes, and then figuring out how many buses are actually required in order to do this. It says, where did I get to? One Route 1 involved an outward and return trip via a residential estate, whereas on alternative departures, Route 2, the return journey did not go through the residential estate, making it a slightly shorter journey. So they've kind of tried to mix it up a little bit for you there. Each route had route had to be calculated separately in order to determine how many buses were for that route. Okay, so there they've worked it out for us. They've shown us the first service and the second service. They've shown us that actually the first service requires 4.2 buses, which has to be rounded up to 5. Second service required 2.95, which had to be rounded up to 3. Therefore, your total number of buses was 8. Like I say, I haven't got a breakdown with the case study. I'm not going to go through it in detail right now. We will do that on other sessions. But that was kind of a fiddly task because they've thrown in a bit of a curveball in there in as much as service 1 doesn't quite follow the same pattern as service 2. So I can see where candidates would potentially fall down, but that's where the devil is in the detail. Question 2. The case study describes SCC's proposal to operate trips to Paris. These will be subject to the requirements imposed by the Package Travel and Linked Travel Arrangements Regulations 2018. Question A asks, outline 2 reasons why the package travel regs would apply to SCC's proposed trips to Paris. And question B said, give 4 items of information that must be included in the brochure for the proposed trips to Paris. And the examiners wrote, this question was very well answered by most candidates, with over 60% gaining at least 4 of the available 6 marks. The main reason that candidates did not always get 4 marks was that they did not follow the instruction to outline reasons why the regulation would apply. Okay, so again, it's one of those questions that is easy to find in the manuals, I guess, if you know where to look. But where it will trip you up and where you'll fall down is those trigger words. A says outline 2 reasons. Don't just state 2 reasons, outline them. So that's kind of influencing you to talk a little bit more about them. The second one says give 4 items of information. So you can literally list 4 things on that second question because it just says give 4. So that's where you've got to be really careful about how the examiners have written those exam papers. And again, it comes back to practicing previous ones to understand what they're looking for. Question 3. You're required to provide a driver schedule for the proposed first outward journey to Paris, starting on the 4th of June 2022. Use the information provided in the case study to complete the table below. Your schedule must begin when the driver starts work at the latest possible time at SCC's operating centre and end at the earliest possible time that the vehicle will be ready to depart from the Paris hotel, to return to Wolvingham without passengers. Then it gives this subnotes. Now remember what they said at the very start. We will give you clear instructions on each, and that's what these subnotes are designed to do. It states you must show a start time, finish time, and a clear description of each activity for each time period. And you must show local time throughout. You must show a destination for each driving period. You are not required to give tachograph modes. Okay, so the one thing I'll pick up there is that on most scheduling tasks that I've seen in previous exams, they've always asked for what tachograph mode you would be using at that point. On this, they've said you don't need it. All you need is a start time, finish time, and whatever it is that you're doing. So the examiners have said that this was a straightforward driver schedule, and the case study gave candidates a departure time from the pickup point as well as a departure time for the Le Shuttle from Sheraton. A significant number of candidates did not, however, give the driver a break before embarking Le Shuttle. The driving time from the pickup point to Sheraton was 4 hours and 20 minutes, but the driver had already driven for 10 minutes to reach the pickup point. Therefore, he had driven for 4 hours and 30 minutes, so a break was required before he could check in and embark. The only other common error was to not change to local time when arriving in France. Okay, so it looks to me like, again, I've not got the case study in front of me, but it looks to me like it's a fairly small scheduling task. But I don't think it's a simple scheduling task because they have thrown in that crossing, they have thrown in that time change, they have thrown in certain points in time that you've got to be at. So not a particularly straightforward scheduling task, as the examiners have said there. They've also made one trip up in there. The thing that they want to catch candidates out with, well, not necessarily catch you out with, but they want to see that you've worked it in, is that break. And I can clearly see on here they've put their break, not rest. So what they've wanted you to do is to work out that actually you've driven for 10 minutes at the start, then you've driven for 4 hours and 20 to get there. So at that point, if you were to embark onto the ferry, which is 10 minutes worth of driving time, I think, or whatever it is, that will take you over your 4.5 hours, and that would put you illegal. So potentially you could go illegal on this schedule 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in. So you might pick up 4 marks maybe, or even 5 marks, depending on their marking schedule. But that's where they're trying to trip you. Now, if you've got that in, great, but you've got to, as it states there, is write in the word break. And I'm really clear on this when I do my scheduling classes with candidates, is that you've got to make sure you write the right word. Break is a break, it's not a rest. Do not write rest if you mean break. Do not write break if you mean rest, because the examiners will not mark it. They're so picky about it, because, I say picky, but a break is not a rest, and a rest is not a break. So your wording's got to be really, really careful. But there's the breakdown for it anyway. Not the biggest scheduling task I've ever seen, but also not the most straightforward one I've ever seen. Question 4. SCC requires a costing schedule for the proposed first journey to Paris, leaving Wolvingham on the 4th of June 2022 and returning there the following day. Use the information provided in the case study to calculate the total cost to SCC of this round-trip journey. Noting, you must name each cost item and give a total for each to the nearest 1p, and you must show all your workings. Okay, so we talk about the big 3 all the time when it comes to the case study exam: operator licensing, driver's hours, which we've seen on the previous question, and vehicle costings, which we're going to look at now. So it's all in there. We know it's all going to be in there, and it is all in there on this one. There was a typical costing question requiring candidates to firstly correctly determine the total mileage for the round-trip journey. Using an incorrect mileage in subsequent calculations of running costs will have resulted in the loss of a total of 7 of the available 14 marks. So a slight miscalculation when it comes to your mileage could potentially have lost you half of the marks on there. So that's why this was really key, to get your mileage right. The case study gave costing information for 2 different coaches, and some candidates lost marks through using data for the wrong coach when completing this question. And that was really unfortunate. If they've thrown 2 coaches in there, you've got to be really, really careful that you make sure you pick the information out for the right one. Such a common error that candidates do, but you'll be kicking yourselves if you lost marks on that. So you pick out the right one. A further commonly occurring error seen by examiners was where candidates had deducted the cost of the tyres from the purchase price of the coach, although the case study stated clearly that the purchase price excluded the cost of the tyres. Again, which is such a common error that candidates make, but such an easy one to make. Because when we show you how to do these costing tasks, we're always saying to you at first, look, take off the tyres, take off the tyres, take off the tyres. Except for when it says it's already taken off the tyres, then you don't take off the tyres. So I can see when you're in that mindset of the exam and you're sort of under pressure and you're reading it quickly, it's such an easy error to make. But that's one where, again, you'll be kicking yourself if you did make an error there, because it's a really easy point to gain or to lose in that instance. Then it gives you a breakdown of the costing task. Now, like I say, it's the first time I've seen it, so it's a quick scan through. Again, it's about working out your distances correctly and working out how many days that journey is over in order to calculate all the costs. But what I would say in this, just by looking at it, and I'm happy to be corrected at any point, but I can't see anywhere where there's any foreign rates in there, so there's no euro conversions in there. It doesn't look like you're having to add any percentages on top of anything. So they've taken out the complications in there and they've left it fairly straightforward, whereby only you really can trip yourself up by miscalculating in this instance. So again, not the most straightforward of costing tasks, but I also wouldn't say it's the most complicated of costing tasks on there. Question 5. The information provided in the case study shows that several offences and operator licence breaches have been committed. Describe 14 such offences or operator licence breaches. Your answer must include enough detail to identify each offence or breach and by whom each is committed. Right, so again we say the big three: driver's hours, vehicle costings, operator licensing. Here's your operator licensing question, and it's a big one by the look of it. 14 offences within this case study need to be identified. Let's see what the examiners have said. In this question, candidates were required to carefully read the case study and, using their knowledge of operator licence criteria, driver's hours regs and other law, identify any infringements, breaches or offences which have been committed. Examiners had identified 18 offences, breaches or infringements within the case study, and candidates were required to describe 14. The question was generally well answered, with most candidates identifying at least 8. And here it gives us 18 different possible correct answers. So things in there I can see such as Sam writing on a disc, or Sam using a photocopy of a disc, or Georgina was extending 10 hours of driving, or transport manager Amanda not active part in the business. So it sounds to me like there was loads of detail in this case study and lots of things going wrong. So it wasn't just necessarily those operator licence breaches in as much as applying for an operator's licence or keeping it, but even the law bits and the driver's hours bits in there. So there's loads of things you could get out of that. But on reflection, looking at that now, that's kind of a question that I would want to answer first on this exam paper, because that's the kind of thing where when I'm reading through the case study at the start of the exam, I'm probably already ascertaining the fact that this question is going to come up by the fact that I've seen loads of infringements throughout the case study. And then once I open that exam paper up and I see this question, I think, yeah, there is a question on picking out all of these. I can start to reel them off. I can start reeling them off quite quickly. So that's a question that they've given you there where you can pick up some quite quick and easy marks. Instead of having to dwell on your costing or having to dwell on your routing or having to dwell on the other questions that might take you a little bit of time, I would be getting into this question first, I think, because this is the one where I could start totting up marks quite easily and quite quickly. And question 6, which is the final question on this paper. This case study describes 4 marketing exercises that Sam has completed. For each of the 4 exercises, state whether the information that Sam has gathered represents primary or secondary marketing data. 78% of candidates correctly answered at least 3 of the 4 parts of this question. Correct answers are given below. Okay, I don't know how many marks this was given for this, but it could have been that it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could have been that it was 8 marks. It could have been that it was only 4 marks. My guess is it's probably 8 marks because they're asking you for 2 parts of each. In that case, again, this is one of those exercises that I'd be looking at and thinking, right, open my book up to marketing and get my head in there quickly. So I can just quickly ascertain from the information given me which one is each. I'm not saying it's straightforward because it will take a little bit of reading, but it is one of those questions that you can bang out before getting again into your routing and your scheduling and the stuff that's going to take you time. So I think that's not an easy question necessarily because, like I say, there's reading involved in there, but it is a question that you can extract from the manual. So I would suggest having done that quite early on in the exam. So that kind of brings us to the end of that paper. And on reflection, let me just skip back. I'm going to skip back right to the start because I want to look at those statistics again. Those statistics of 48.3% of candidates achieving this level. I would have suggested that that would have been higher on this paper. I'm not saying this is an easy paper or anything like that. It's not. And when you put under that exam pressure, it becomes even harder. So I completely sympathise with people of why they lose marks in certain areas. But on the majority of these questions, even the examiners themselves have stated there that candidates haven't lost marks because they didn't know the answer. Candidates have lost marks because they've failed to pick out the detail. They've failed to read the question correctly. And that is the hardest part for us as the instructors to take, really, is that we can get all the knowledge into you and we can push you into the areas that you need to be pushed into you and teach the things that you need to be taught. But we can't teach you to read the questions. You can only teach yourself that, and that is through continual practicing of these questions. I think if you've practiced and practiced and practiced as many of those papers as you possibly can, you will have got to the point where you will have picked out the detail that they need in those questions and they need in those answers. So like I say to road haulage, what I say to passenger, to any candidates that take these exams, is practice really does make perfect. So if you didn't pass this exam this time round, take these notes on board, jump into that website, download it, read it in detail. In fact, go back on all the previous examiners' reports as well and see how they all tally up together, because they will have a correlation. And see what the examiners need, because that will help you going into the next set of exams. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it slightly informative. If you have, then of course, as always, please hit the like button and make my day, make Enterprise's day, by hitting the subscribe to our YouTube channel button as well. It does make a huge difference and it does help us build some even better content in the future. So if you are looking to do your exams again in June with us, good luck. I hope you prepare well. And if you've got any questions for us, please by all means ask anything you've got between now and then. Otherwise, I will see you on the next one.